Hello everybody, and welcome to the Meeting House for our conversation on religion and American life. Your host, Dr. Dwight A. Moody, is on location at Asbury University in Kentucky to report on the student revival there. I am Reverend Dr. U.A. Thompson in the studio in Taylor, South Carolina. Michael Sebastian is here at the piano. Today we have music, a regular news report with 5 stories, and my own story about a revival 30-some years ago right here in Greenville, South Carolina. But first, I have an invitation. On March 23rd, we are opening the studio to a live audience for the filming of our broadcast. We will have room for about 20 people right here in the studio. We invite the curious and the committed to come right here to the studio to watch as we film The Meeting House live. The Meeting House each week, and those who may be coming for the first time to enjoy a segment first and on hand. The seats are free, but reservations are required. Please visit our website at themeetinghouse.net and send us an email. That is Thursday, March 23rd, here in the studio at WGGS TV 16. We are pleased to have Dr. Moody joining us from Wilmore, Kentucky, on the campus of Asbury College. Here is the report on the spontaneous religious meeting that has emerged on the campus of Asbury University. Dr. Moody, give us a report.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. And yes, I am Dwight A. Moody, your host in the Meeting House, but today, not in the studio. I'm on the campus of Asbury University in Wilmore, Kentucky. Behind me, you will see people already gathering, standing in line to find a place. It's a beautiful day in Asbury, Kentucky. Asbury is a small town of about 7,000 people in central Kentucky, just south of Lexington, Kentucky. It is on the banks of the Kentucky River. The university here is associated with the Wesleyan tradition. I know this campus well. I've been here many times. The fact is, a few years ago, I taught the course on preaching. Many of our students who were involved in the Academy of Preachers came from the Asbury University. And I'm glad to be here to report on the unusual happenings here at Asbury University. I want to show you the university as we stroll around. The main administration building. And then just across the street is Asbury Seminary. Asbury Seminary is an independent seminary, although it has been approved as a United Methodist school. Years ago, I took my very first course in seminary work, working toward a Master of Divinity degree at this school. Asbury Seminary was a course in Arabic. And on the way to campus, driving my little orange VW Bug to take my midterm exam in Arabic, I had a terrible automobile accident, was thrown out of the car. The car was smashed like an accordion, and I took my insurance settlement money and bought 2 round-trip tickets to Israel. But that's another story. Today I'm glad to be here in Wilmore. I'm glad to tell you the story and show you a little bit about what's been happening here on this campus. I remember when I was a student at Georgetown College, I came down here for the revival of 1970, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that a little bit later in the program. The basic story here is that 2 weeks ago, at the end of a normal chapel service, the students decided to stay and pray and to seek the presence of God. From that time till this time, the chapel has remained full pretty much around the clock. 3 other assembly rooms here on the campus of the university and the seminary have been opened up, as this has drawn not only students but people from around the country and around the world. It's been an unusual phenomenon. There's been a great deal written about it. I preached about it this past Sunday, and I'm glad to be here to report on it again. Here once again are the people that are gathered to get a ticket or to get a space, to get a pew in the sanctuary when they begin at noon today. I'm Dwight A. Moody, not in the Meeting House, but in Wilmore, Kentucky. I'll be back in a few minutes with more of my report on the great Asbury Revival. But now it's time for the news, and my colleague, Dr. U.A. Thompson, will read the news to you.
Thank you, Dwight. We look forward to hearing more about what has been happening at Asbury University in Wilmore, Kentucky. Let's begin the news today. In Los Angeles, Roman Catholic Auxiliary Bishop of Los Angeles, David O'Connell, was shot dead by a gunman. Later arrested and charged with murder, Carlos Medina, the husband of the housekeeper, was the man charged. O'Connell was born in 1953 in County Cork, Ireland, and named Auxiliary Bishop of the Los Angeles Archdiocese in 2015 by Pope Francis. Salt Lake City, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has been fined $5 million for failure to properly report their investments to the United States Securities Exchange Commission in an apparent effort to hide the size of their portfolio. The church concealed its investments in a series of shell companies. When the fraud came to light in 2018, the total investments were estimated at, get this, a $32 billion amount. Whoa. In other news, Los Angeles, California Saddleback Church, founded and pastored by world-famous Rick Warren, has been evicted from the Southern Baptist Convention for electing a woman as pastor. Her name is Stacy Wood, who, along with her husband Andy, was elected co-pastor of the famous church succeeding Rick Warren. Other churches disfellowshipped for the same infraction, including ones in Louisville, Kentucky, Griffin, Georgia, Baltimore, Maryland, and Jackson, Mississippi. In Houston and in Chicago, 2 Christian celebrities have written books. Influential Bible teacher Beth Moore of Houston published a memoir highlighting her troubled childhood, her rise to fame, and recent family religious crises. It is titled All My Knotted Up Life. In Chicago, 104-year-old Roman Catholic nun Jean Dolores Smith released her first book, Wake Up with Purpose: What I've Learned in My First 100 Years Smith called the public eye as chaplain to the Loyola University Ramblers during their implorable run to the 2018 Final Four. Wilmore, the student revival that began Wednesday, February the 8th, is being relocated from the chapel of Asbury University to nearly other nearby sanctuaries, claiming the thousands of curious people from all over the world have disrupted both the university and the town. The school president, Kevin Brown, announced that the communities could not continue to welcome and host so many people. Security, parking, and food services have been stretched to the breaking point. Going forward, attendance at the student-led prayer services would be limited to people 25 years old and younger. Others will be seated in remote venues. That is the news this week. I am UA Thompson in the Meeting House. After a short break, I will be back here in the studio, and Dwight A. Moody will report from the campus of Asbury University. You are in the Meeting House. I am Dr. UA Thompson, hosting our conversation on religion and American life. Michael Sebastian is at the piano, and our host, Dwight A. Moody, is in Kentucky. Our focus today is the prayer revival that has transfixed the small Kentucky town of Wilmore, just south of Lexington. Many of you have read accounts of what is happening and seen videos of the services in Hughes Auditorium. Here's Dwight A. Moody from Wilmore, Kentucky.
Here I am again, across the street from Hughes Auditorium. I'm actually on the campus of Asbury Seminary. In the background, Asbury University. What's been happening here for the last 2 weeks has been termed a revival, and I want to put this in the broader context of revivalism in America. The United States has had some very famous revival events. We could go all the way back to 18th century New England and the preaching of the Puritans, especially somebody like Jonathan Edwards. You remember his famous sermons, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." Many of us read that in handbooks of American literature. Or in the 1800s in New York, Charles G. Finney, the lawyer turned preacher, who put an emphasis upon the response of the people to a sermon. So he had what they called an anxious bench. where people could come at the end of a sermon, at the end of a service, and pray and receive counsel. But the three most famous revivals in American history, that's what I want to talk about. In 1801, about 50 miles from Wilmore here, at a meeting house called Cane Ridge, which is just east of Lexington, Kentucky, the ministers at that church and a few other churches put out a call for a holy meeting. They were surprised when 25,000 people showed up. And that lasted for days and weeks, and people camped and sang like they're doing here behind me. In a vast field, there would be 5 or 6 preaching posts, and of course people eating. There were all kinds of expressions of religious ecstasy, like barking and rolling in the ground and that sort of thing. But out of that event, in what was then the old frontier, came one of the great religious traditions of modern America, and that is the Christian church movement, and that includes the Disciples of Christ and the independent Christian churches and the churches of Christ. All of it trace their roots to that great revival meeting in 1801. Almost 100 years later, out on the West Coast, in a storefront church on Azusa Street in Los Angeles, the beginnings of what we now call the Pentecostal movement. This was a racially mixed group. They began to pray for the filling of the Holy Spirit, and things began to happen. They began to speak in tongues and testify to miracles and words of prophecy and all the things that we associate with the Pentecostal religion. That movement spread all across America, as a matter of fact, all across the world. In 1958, it was ignited even in the Catholic Church at a retreat of Duquesne University graduate students in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The center of the Catholic charismatic movement became Notre Dame University. And when I was a graduate student there in the Department of Theology, my teacher teaching me, Thomas Aquinas, was the papal liaison with the Catholic charismatic movement. He led the Pentecostal or charismatic mass on campus every week. The Pentecostal movement continues to be one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful, Christian movement in the world today. But many of us, my age, remember back in the 1960s and 70s what we call the Jesus movement. This started out in Southern California. I think they've even made a movie about how this has started. This was a movement outside of the established churches. It was a movement of guitars and long hair and contemporary music and exuberance in worship. And it swept all across the country. We remember a representative of that movement by the name of Arthur Blessed, who had a big 8 or 10 foot cross with wheels on the bottom, and he carried it all across America, preaching on street corners. As part of that movement, 53 years ago, right here in Hughes Chapel, the exact same thing happened that's happening right now. I remember it because I was a college student just about 30 miles away at Georgetown College, and I was walking across campus on our campus going to dinner in the Student Center on Friday night when another student, Phil Roberts by name, he hailed me and said, "Dwight, there's a revival down at Asbury, let's go." We piled into a car, drove down there. Must have been about 6 or 7 o'clock. We sat on the back row of Hughes Chapel until way past midnight. And somehow, I don't think it was because of anything we did, the spark of fervent religion, which caught hold here, jumped over to Georgetown College, and there was a powerful religious movement there that lasted days and weeks. Many people today are writing on Facebook remembering that event as part of the larger Jesus movement revival that spread across the country. So what we're seeing here today has a long history, and many people in the United States who have been shaped by different kinds of revivalism find in these kinds of events, even as I do, an appreciation for these young people who are experiencing the presence of God. We honor them for it. We believe it can change their lives, as indeed it changed ours when we were young. I'm Dwight Moody from the Meeting House, but today on the campus, standing on Asbury Seminary, looking back at Asbury University over my shoulder. I'll be back in just a minute.
Thank you, Dwight. After 2 weeks of intense religious activity, including the arrival of thousands and thousands of people from all over the country, the university announced changes. Here is the president of the university, Kevin Brown, speaking in Hughes Chapel about the changes. Let's take a listen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin. I work here at Asbury. Thank you for being here. Friends, we're now approaching 2 consecutive weeks of nonstop worship, prayer, gathering, consecration, commitment to one another. Incredible. And whether you call this a revival or a renewal or an outpouring or an awakening, what we have experienced on this campus these last few weeks is unlike anything I have ever experienced in my entire life. I just keep repeating the firsthand witness I've seen of radical humility, these incredible acts of compassion. We see confession, we see consecration, we see life-altering commitment. And when I walk into this space, and even when I'm outside and just meeting the guests, it is just a beautiful picture of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Now, I want to tell you, earlier today, we had authorities that had to redirect traffic away from Wilmore. Our town's institutions here and our town's infrastructure, I just want to be clear, is just not in a place to absorb at this moment the influx of the blessed guests that we have had come to Wilmore. And I have seen incredible men and women who have bent over backwards. Our staff, our faculty, our own students, the way that Asbury students have made room at the table. I've seen people here at 8 a.m. and then they leave at 1 a.m. and they've come back the next morning at 8 a.m. And we've said, you've got to take a break, and they say, I know, but it's worth it. Whatever they need to do to make space for visitors. I've seen volunteers mobilized near and far to come and do whatever they can do, again, to make space so that others can experience this renewal and an encounter with Jesus Christ. I've seen other institutions in town that have redeployed and redirected their own people and their own resources to make space at the table. But I want to tell you what I'm talking about now, this moment that we're in now, is different. We just do not have the infrastructure to support the guests that we're having come to Wilmore. So I just want to announce a few shifts that are being made for us to host this differently. First, live stream. You know, from the start, we have avoided live stream here at Asbury University on our campus. Our desire was to honor this space, and our desire was to allow for a more organic unfolding of what was taking place here. And we still would strongly, strongly request that visitors do not live stream. But the time has come where we realize that we need to host this differently. And if visitors from out of town cannot be in this space, we want to provide them with an alternative to visualize and be a part of what's happening here. So we are utilizing our live stream technology. Second, I want to talk about a service shift. As you know, our focus, and I'll just tell you, my heart has been on younger generations, Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And we want to continue to welcome this group, and we want to continue to make space for this group all the way through Thursday for our National Collegiate Day of Prayer. However, starting on Tuesday, the day after tomorrow, the 21st, we will not have any afternoon services open to the general public beginning Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. We will only have evening services, and those services are reserved for high schoolers through college age 25 and under, beginning at 7:30 p.m. And let me say, we are diligently working to identify other spaces and locations here in Central Kentucky to continue to simulcast or to host in person for those who want to come to Central Kentucky and have this experience. And we'll make that announcement and get that out as soon as possible. But I'm sharing this because people are making travel plans right now. And out of a deep respect for them, and please hear that, out of deep respect for them, I don't want anyone to plan to come to Wilmore or to plan to come to Hughes Auditorium only to be denied the opportunity to actually sit into one of our facilities. Finally, I just want to end with this, and we'll get started. To play a role in stewarding God's Spirit on our campus, in this area, in this region, and to do it in collaboration with the Asbury community. Some of the best people that I know has been one of the greatest honors of my life. I'm not being hyperbolic. It's been one of the greatest honors of my life. To do that with our students here is one of the greatest honors of my life. To have other schools come to this space is one of the greatest honors of my life. We have seen, and what we have seen since February 8th can rightly be described as the fruit of our mission. But it is not ours to hold alone. We are not the keepers of this movement. We're hearing amazing stories from across the world, not just Kentucky, not just the U.S., the world. And when folks have come to Wilmore and have asked me and have asked my friends what's happening, there's so much to say. And frankly, I don't know how to describe a lot of what is taking place. But I do say this: people are hungry. There is a deep hunger. And when I hear the word hunger, I think of Jesus' most famous sermon, Matthew 5:6. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness. They will be filled. Hear this. Blessed are those who hunger for a right relationship with God, and blessed are those who hunger to be in a right relationship with neighbor. They are the ones that leave the dinner table satisfied. We're looking to other schools. We're looking at other churches. We're looking to you to be co-commissioners, to partner, to go out, to let our light so shine, to let this fire blaze in other places that ultimately points to God. Other schools, other churches, our communities, find those dark places and go there and be light. My heart is for this young generation. And I'm so thankful for the men and women who have gone before us, who want to steward their spiritual experience as well. And I just want to end with one last thing. We have been changing our schedule, and I'm trying to do that as responsibly and faithfully as I can, and as prayerfully as I can. But I've seen many headlines coming out saying Asbury University is ending the revival services or scheduling an end to revival. And while it is true that after Thursday of this week, we will conclude our last service in Hughes Auditorium here and on the campus of Asbury, we know this is not a conclusion to hungry hearts that are being stirred and responding by seeking Jesus Christ. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your prayers. Thank you for how I've seen you love one another. It's inspiring. Thank you for your attitude. And please continue to pray for the church. Pray for these young adults who are going to change the world and be change agents for Christ. Pray that we all might be changed. Pray that's what's happening would move across our states and our countries and our continents for the fullest realization of our mutual humanity and the edification of the common good in our communities and ultimately for the glorification of God. My prayer is that when the world sees us, when they see Wilmore, when they see you in your communities, when they see what's happening at other churches and other schools and other professions all across the world, let them see Jesus Christ. Let them see the best of Christianity. Let them see the best of the church. And let them see what Jesus said in John 17, unity. I pray that they are one, Father, as you and I are one. God bless you. Thank you for being here this night.
A few years ago, Dr. Moody taught a course for Asbury University. The course was preaching. In that class was a student named Victoria McClary. She graduated from the university, enrolled at Asbury University, and graduated from the seminary in 21. She is now a minister to youth at Wilmore United Methodist Church, just at the edge of the seminary's campus. Dwight sat down with Victoria in the sanctuary of the church. He spoke with her about her personal engagement with the revival. He was especially interested in its impact on this one local church. I think you'll find their conversation very interesting. Here it is.
Thank you, UA. And I'm Dwight Moody here in the sanctuary of the Wilmore United Methodist Church, Wilmore, Kentucky. I have been prowling over the campus of Asbury University and Asbury Seminary, talking to people and investigating things and recording things. And I'm here in the chapel with a young lady who is a graduate of both the university and the seminary. You graduated from the seminary, Victoria McClary. Graduated in when?
May of 2021.
May of 2021. So you entered the university what year?
2013, and then graduated in 2017.
2017. And tell them what was the very best course you took in 4 years. No, that's it. I actually taught a course here, and this is how I met Victoria in our preaching class, and I remember it very strongly. You graduated there and came here, finished. Mm-hmm. And what is your overall ambition?
I'm not really sure. I like doing youth ministry. That's what I do right now. That's what I got my degree in undergrad. And so I've been doing that for 6 years now. And we'll see what the future holds. I might be doing college ministry or something like outside of the church. So.
Have you started the ordination process?
Yes, I'm kind of in the middle of it. I've been certified for a little bit, but everything, in the Methodist Church, and not really sure where I'm really leaning towards. I've kind of just put that on hold for right now.
The Methodist Church, of course, I've reported on it many times in the Meetinghouse, this splintering of the fellowship. I've got good friends on both sides of this, and I know that's true here at the seminary. Mm-hmm. So you graduated, you're the youth minister here, and then 2 weeks ago, on Wednesday morning, when this thing first broke out in the chapel across the street, when did you first hear about it?
It was probably either through social media, people that I know that have posted about it, or I work with some people that are kind of more closely tied with the university at my other part-time job. So they were just kind of telling me about it and was like, you have to go over there, you have to see what's going on. I was like, yeah, I'll probably go, but I had plans, and so I was like, I'll get over there when I can. But that was kind of the first time I really heard about it.
So eventually thousands of people from around the country started streaming into Little Wilmore, Kentucky, yes. But it didn't pull you over there strongly.
I wanted to go. I just wasn't sure, it's the students thing, we'll see what happens. I went the Friday, after it had started. So it was still pretty small at that point, just kind of mostly students from the university, a few people from seminary and people from the community. And so it was really neat to see it when it was kind of at that smaller level.
So when you mean smaller, what do you mean? The chapel was not full?
It was not, yeah. It was probably after chapel on Friday, that's when I went. And it was pretty full, even just for after chapel, but there wasn't a line or people standing in the aisle or anything like that. And then I went the next day on Saturday night, and that's kind of when it started to get more people. They had the balcony was full. I think it was probably the most full I've ever seen, Hughes Auditorium. And so kind of had this feeling yeah, probably a lot more people are gonna start coming. But
so what was your experience? You went on Friday and then again on Saturday. Did it grip you? Did it capture your imagination, or did you have some skepticism about it?
I think just the biggest thing for me was that I felt a lot of peace just being in that space. And I'm usually not a person who likes a lot of crowds and all that kind of stuff. But I really felt peace in that space. And so I think that's what a lot of people have said, is that the Lord and the peace of the Lord was really palpable in that. So for me, that's what I felt. And then on Saturday, just worshiping with so many people, I think that was just really impactful for me, just seeing all these people coming together and really just crying out to God together.
Did you go back after that Saturday?
I tried to. I was gonna ask some of our youth to go with me, like that Sunday before our youth group met, but no one really showed up for it. There was just so many people at that point too. Like there were starting to be lines of people like standing in the lobby of the auditorium and stuff. But so I like stood there for a minute because I couldn't even get in to Hughes. But yeah, that was like the last time that I went.
So you were there on Saturday night. The next morning was Sunday morning. Could you tell any impact or difference in the congregation here? Wilmore United Methodist Church is essentially on the campus of the seminary. We can pretty much see Hughes Auditorium from here. You're right in the middle of it geographically. Did it have an impact on the church?
I think so. It felt like people were kind of more intentional, I guess, with their worship that day. Like, I just felt like, for me, after I had been in that space with so many people, like, music and, like, worship music just, I don't know, it, like, had this new feeling, this new impact for me, and really thinking through, like, what are these words that we're singing? Like, why are we singing these? And so, I don't know, it just kind of felt like there's a lot of new life and energy in the worship to me.
Did your pastor, now that you've had 2 Sundays, has your pastor mentioned it from the pulpit?
Yeah, we've talked about it. I mean, it's kind of hard to avoid it when it's right kind of in our back door. And we had a few people visit this past Sunday who had been here like Saturday night, and were here for the Sunday afternoon service.
Could you tell a new spirit in your pastor? You think it energized him?
I'm not sure. I mean, I feel like we have all like had a lot of complex emotions about it, and just kind of going through the like, oh, it's really exciting, like we're really glad about what God's doing, to like being really stressed and anxious about like how many people have been here, and like how hard it's been to get around town and all this kind of stuff. But I don't know, maybe.
Does your ambivalence about it extend to the meaning of it, or the impact of it, or is it real?
I mean, I think that it's real. I feel like there's been so many things that I've read, so many critiques, and so many like people who are all for it and everything. So, but I feel like when I was there, I experienced that peace from God, and getting one of my professors to pray over me in that moment, because I just felt like the Lord was like asking me to go down front and receive that prayer.
While you were there on a Saturday, you went to the altar, and one of your professors from the seminary or the university?
The university.
You approached him or her and asked that professor to pray for you. And this is what a lot of people were doing.
Yeah.
This is a lot. They were asking students to pray for one another, and professors, in the sense of peace. Do you think one of the most powerful and perceptive commentaries on it that I've read was by a graduate student at the seminary? I actually quoted it in my own sermon. I pastor a micro church over in North Carolina. So I was preaching to 18 people on Sunday, and I love it. But I quoted him because I thought what he had to say was so powerful, and it talked about the kind of stresses that these young people are under, and how the simplicity and peacefulness of this event responded to the particular angst that he thought characterized this generation. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I've noticed and just like going over the past few years, especially like 2020, when we couldn't really be in worship together and we couldn't meet together, even just from like a youth level, like they have loved to be in the same space together, and just have time spent together. And I think coming out of that time where we weren't able to worship, and just the simplicity of having guitars and just people leading, like I think that has probably added a lot to it.
I hadn't even thought about that angle on it. And I think that strikes me as very true. That the background of it is as much the pandemic and the isolation and the uncertainty of the pandemic. And this was a great coming together for worship. Now, they've announced there's a new strategy.
Yeah.
And they're not going to let us old people. You're probably still young enough maybe to get in.
I'm actually above it's weird, I'm above the bracket. I'm like 28, so
28.
yeah.
So it's 25 and under can get in Hughes. Otherwise, you have to go to one of the ancillary places. I'm so old, they won't even let me on the campus probably. What do you think is likely to happen now?
I mean, I would hope that they continue to respond to what the Lord is doing. And I feel like since it started with the college students, it started with their openness and their willingness to respond to God. I'm glad that they're just kind of bringing it to just that group. And I am really proud of the professors and staff there that have really protected that space for students. They've opened up just certain parts, when there started to be a lot of people, they were only this front section is just for college students, or if you're a college student and you can't sit in that section because there's not room, you can come on stage. And so I just think that that's really awesome that they have had them in the forefront the whole time, because it started with them.
Do you think that it's going to impact your church here in any way? Here we are in the sanctuary.
I mean, I would hope so. I would hope that, people in our church see just the willingness of young people to, step into that space with God, and, that they are open to what God's doing.
But you haven't really felt it yet in the church. That's
I don't know.
the sense I'm getting from you.
I mean, I know that some of our congregation has been over there, and, has gone to some of the services, but, I haven't really directly talked with people about it very much, so I couldn't say.
So you think it hasn't, as it were, bled over this way too much?
I don't know.
Has your pastor been?
Yes. Yeah, he went, I think, Friday morning, before I was over there. But yeah, he went when there was fewer people, and just to see what was happening. So
I told you I was here 53 years ago, in February of 1970.
okay.
And a friend and I was a student at Georgetown, and we came over on Friday night, sat on the back row on the ground floor of Hughes Auditorium, and stayed till past midnight.
Oh wow.
Just watching. And so I can understand how all this spiritual tourism, I call it, people coming either to observe or to participate in it. There's such a yearning for true spirituality around. And I know you sense that even as a minister, people want authenticity.
Oh yeah.
Victoria, thank you for talking to me today.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I want to hope that what's going on across the street would impact the church here, and in a very powerful and true way. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Dwight Moody from the Meeting House with Victoria McClary in the sanctuary of the Wilmore United Methodist Church, where she serves as the youth minister. We'll be back in just a minute.
Thank you, Dwight. Prior to his going to Kentucky, Dwight traveled to Texas to meet with Meeting House donor Pat Ayres. She took him on a tour of the Shield Ranch, just outside of Austin, Texas. Let's take a look while Michael takes to the keys. What a beautiful, breathtaking, sprawling grounds of pasture and place of God's greatness. We thank Pat for her support, and we thank you for your support. If you wish to support the Meeting House, visit our website at themeetinghouse.net. Go to support page, and there you will find directions on how you can make a donation. We have time for one final word from Dr. Moody. Then I will share my own story of revival in Greenville, South Carolina.
I have a few thoughts about the revival going on at Asbury University. I'm sitting in the chapel, Estes Chapel, across the street from Hughes Auditorium. This is the chapel of Asbury Seminary, and I've been in this chapel a number of times to worship. I honor what is happening across the street and in other venues in Wilmore, Kentucky, and even around the country as the spirit of revival has caught fire. I believe this can be and is real for many people. Many people are practicing the presence of God, are experiencing a pull toward spiritual things, toward the transformed life through which they can pour out their gifts and calling to serve humanity. I honor this. Of course, there are skeptics around the country. I've read many and heard many. There are many videos on TikTok and Facebook condemning this, ridiculing all of it, making fun of it. And there is a way in which this whole holy event can dissolve into politics and partisan bickering. It can be taken over by those who want to, let's say, promote Christian nationalism. We have to recognize that both of these institutions represent white Christian evangelical life in the United States, which has been the source of much of the energy of Christian nationalism and even Trumpism. So to the extent that these young people are drawn further and deeper into that stream of American public and religious life, it makes me sad. But this has the capacity to ignite a revival fervor all across the country. I preached in my own church recently, this past Sunday, calling for revival. We need revival in our lives. We need revival in our churches. We need revival in our country. But the kind of revival we need is not just prayers in chapels. We need a whole movement in our nation to take care of the beautiful creation and avert catastrophe for the whole human race. We need a fresh energy to resist gun violence in our country. And as a matter of fact, I think and believe strongly that Christians ought to take the lead in giving up guns. We should have altar calls in which people walk the aisle and bring their guns and lay them on the altar and let them be melted down and turned into tools for community gardening and other such things. We need a revival of kindness. We need to push aside the meanness that has divided us. We need a revival that overcomes the tribalism of our nation that's dividing brother against brother and sister against sister, that's dividing families and churches and communities and even the nation. There's too much ugliness, too much unkindness, too much rudeness on the streets, on the roads, in schools, in school board meetings. We need to treat one another as if every person we meet is the very presence of the Lord Jesus Christ. We need to see in everybody's face the eyes, the heart and soul of Jesus Christ our Lord. I think that's what he taught us. I think this is what it means to be a Christian. regardless of whether we participate in a revival meeting in a chapel or on a retreat or in a mass meeting. I pray for a revival in my own life, and I suspect you do as well. But the kind of revival that stirs the human spirit, that brings out the best of us, is that which can ignite the virtues of compassion and courage and kindness in every single person in our country. This is what we need. This is the revival that we need. And if what is happening in Asbury, Kentucky and other places around the country cultivates this and leads this and empowers this, I say amen. Let it happen. And let it happen to me.
Thank you, Dr. Moody. I am Reverend Dr. U.A. Thompson in the Meeting House, in the studios of WGGS TV 16 in Taylor, South Carolina. We have been reporting today on the religious events at Asbury University in a small town in Kentucky. But I have a story of my own right here in Greenville, South Carolina, that took place some 30 plus years ago. The Lord instructed me to come to the steps of my church in downtown Greenville and start praying every day at 7:30 a.m. to put a banner above my head calling for people to join me in prayer. I had many parishioners to come and kneel down with me. I put my white robe on, and every morning I knelt and prayed, and we played music aloud on the overhead speakers for all in the community to hear, instrumental melodies going forward. The days went forward, the prayers went forward. One person, two people, 3, 4. Something magical happened. Soon, the porch, the steps were filling up with people, black, white, Asian, Hispanic. Until my surprise, one day I looked in front of me, behind me rather, and there was a complete traffic jam on the 4-lane highway in front of our church. People had literally stopped their cars in the middle of the highway on their way to work and had gotten out of their cars and literally filled up the front lawn of the church and started kneeling and praying. I had never witnessed anything like this. Well, that started a revival. We immediately erected a large tent across the street from the church. Believe it or not, WGGS TV 16 came and filmed each and every service. Dr. Jimmy and Joanne Thompson was a part of those services. Deb Richardson Moore, who later became a minister and pastored Triune Methodist Church in downtown Greenville, was a reporter with the Greenville News. She was a reporter covering many of those revivals. That revival went over 180 days in the city of Greenville. Crime was reportedly low during that time. We had people coming from as far as Florida saying that they were healed as a result of those revival meetings that did not stop, that went for over 180 days, 7 days a week. We had revival in the city of Greenville. People from my Baptist faith told me, "What are you doing? You're not charismatic. We hear you're laying on hands. We hear people are speaking in tongues." But it was a move of God that I had no control over. It was God's thing. And all I could tell them was, God is doing something that I cannot explain. My education could not explain it. My seminary training could not explain it. All I knew was God was up to something. My father-in-law, who had been a longtime Baptist deacon, confessed to me one evening. He said, "Thompson, the ground shook under me when you were praying for a man that said he was healed of his illness. It wasn't me healing him. It was no one but God." I cannot explain what God did during that time. Officers with the Greenville City Police Department would come and stand around the tent in amazement at what God was doing. I can only say, when God gets ready to move, God does what God do. And we have to reserve the right to let God be God. We can't always explain God, but what we can do is trust when He does what He do. He knows when, where, and how to do what needs to be done. Are we willing to trust Him and get out of His way long enough to let Him do what He does? We can't always box God in a corner and make Him be who we want Him to be, but we must let Him do and be who He is, even when we cannot explain what He is doing or why He is doing it. Our education don't always prepare us to understand how or why God moves in the manner or the way that He does. But we must trust that God knows what He is doing and why He is doing it. I can't explain why a brown cow eat green grass and produce white milk and red meat, but I do believe it because I've seen it. St. Augustine said, "We don't understand to believe, we believe to understand." And we have to understand that God knows what God is doing. Stop relegating everything to just being Pentecostal or charismatic if it happened outside the halls of academia. Listen, the entire Catholic faith believe in exorcism, and they're some of the most educated people that there is. We have to accept that God is up to something. God will never leave Himself without a witness. And when God is at work, we do well to let Him work and trust that He's doing what He needs to do for the people that He needs to do it with. That is my experience with God in Greenville. Thank you. You have been in the meeting house today with your host, Dwight A. Moody in Wilmore, Kentucky, and me, U.A. Thompson, Sebastian here in the studio. Thank you for joining our conversation on religion and American life. Please visit our website for all the podcasts and commentaries and news stories. www.TheMeetingHouse.net. Send us a message to let us know you are listening and watching. Join us again in the Meeting House, when we bring you the news, reviews, conversations, and commentary on religion and American life. Be safe and God bless.